Good morning. I'm Andrea Hamlis Dodge with the Ames Chamber of Commerce, coming to you live from my kitchen. With COVID-19 right now, the Chamber staff are changing the way we're doing business. We're still open for business, but some of us are not in the office. We know you have a lot of questions, so we wanted to do some virtual discussions with some experts in our community. And our first expert is our very own Drew Camp. He oversees our public policy program for the Ames Chamber. Good morning, Drew.
Good morning, Andrea. I'm joining you from my dining room. So
it looks very nice. Very nice artwork in the background.
Oh, thanks. That's Florence, so a little artsy.
Well, let's get started. So talking today about public policy, there's a lot happening, changing minute by minute, actually. Maybe start at the top with federal. President Trump has been doing lots of different press conferences. There's a lot of different changes and proposals. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that and also how that impacts our local businesses?
Oh, yeah, sure. So yesterday was his most recent press conference. And what we've kind of seen is he does one, then the governor does one, and I anticipate that continuing to happen throughout the country. But in his press conference yesterday, he stated that those with community transmission, which Iowa does have now, we've seen that with the cases in Dallas County, they're advising that they close bars, schools, restaurants, gyms, and other places where there could be that transmission. Mm-hmm. Iowa hasn't gone that far yet, but we have seen other states do that. I think Illinois has been a really good case of that. We saw that last week, just this weekend. He also touched on the fact that it could continue for months. He noted into July or August, and it could very well push us into a recession. I'll touch a little bit on the market later, but we've seen some impacts in the market as well. You're strongly recommended to avoid gatherings of 10 plus people, and governors were encouraged to work to attain respirators and ventilators and not ask the federal government to get those for them. Those are going to be really important for hospitals and medical care as we move forward with individuals that have this, but not only thinking about COVID-19, but there's also people using those already from influenza themselves. So they're already largely being used due to the flu season as well. They also need to have better testing, isolation, and contact tracing, and they really emphasize social distancing as key, hence you and I coming to each other from the kitchen and the dining room. And then there's right now about 4,500 cases that have occurred, but as additional testing occurs, as we've seen in other countries throughout the world, we do expect that number to be much higher and grow as we get more tests done. I did mention the market a little bit. The market yesterday dropped about 3,000 points or 12% on Monday alone. But the good news is just today and about 5 minutes ago when I looked at the numbers, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up about 0.5, 0.6 at 20,300, and the S&P 500 was up about 2.25 at 2440. So that is a little bit of encouragement, obviously, to see some increase in the market. I think part of that is really what we've seen coming out of the federal government with the House passing their legislation that the Senate's now considering, the aid that we've seen in the $8.3 billion in aid that was recently passed a couple weeks ago, but then also what the Fed did with the 0% interest rates and the $700 billion in quantitative easing. And what that is really just the Fed bought bonds to inject money into the economy.
Okay, so with the proposed, there's new legislation that's been proposed for, we have President Trump proposed $850 billion in aid. Tell us a little bit about that. And again, what is that impact or how might that help out our local businesses?
Yeah, so I'll touch on the Trump proposal of the 850, and then I'll touch on the House proposal that's currently going to be considered by the Senate. So the Trump proposal is about $850 billion, and it would really impact, they'd want to inject a lot of do some infusion into the economy to positively impact it in that regard. They really are looking at it via payroll tax, but they also want to look at about $50 billion directed specifically to the airline industry that would be definitely, obviously, is being impacted in this. And Secretary Mnuchin is really running point on this. He was running point on the negotiations with Speaker Pelosi as well. And one of the positive things we have seen in all of this is it actually has been bipartisan. So Speaker Pelosi was involving Minority Leader McCarthy. And then we've seen that as well. Now as we transition into the Senate, we hope to continue to see that. But really that payroll tax and then that $50 billion to the airlines is really to just help prop up some of those key industries and then get some cash into the economy.
What kind of timeline would that be?
They would want to see that pass. Ideally, the administration wants to see that $850 billion package passed by week's end.
Okay. And then it'll take some time to get into distributed into the economy and helping out. How about, are there any other I know that the Small Business Administration has announced some disaster relief loans. What are some other federal programs that are helping out right now, or that have proposed to help out some of our small businesses?
Oh, yeah, sure. So real quick, first, I'll just touch real quickly on the House bill as well. The House passed their COVID-19 legislation Monday night. The reason they had passed it on Saturday, but they had to vote on it again because there were some technical corrections for the administration to get on board. So they then brought it back and voted on it via unanimous consent. It then got passed because the House is currently not in. They actually have delayed and suspended going back to DC for indefinitely. But what the House bill would really do, which is now on the Senate side for consideration, is it would ensure that workers get paid sick and family leave. So those would be two separate things, the 2 weeks of sick leave and then FMLA, where you could have up to 12 weeks off. It would increase unemployment insurance and guarantee that all Americans, this is a really big one, get the diagnostic testing free of charge for coronavirus. I know some of the things have been flagged already in the Senate by some of the senators, saying that they have some concerns that they would like to see it be a little bit bigger and more impactful in their words. So that's something that we'll continue to see what the Senate does. But in addition to Trump's proposal, Senator Schumer had been out talking, Minority Leader Schumer had been out talking about a $750 billion proposal. And that's where it really goes back to that bipartisan conversation, where we're going to continue to see that moving forward, where everyone's involved to try to get the best ideas put forward. And you did mention, too, the Small Business Administration's economic injury disaster loans. Those are really, really important. Before I move to that, though, I do want to touch on the fact that that House legislation, that hasn't been passed yet. So what has been passed is that $8.3 billion in aid that was 2 weeks ago, and the quantitative easing and the 0% interest rates. So if you're hearing, or if you heard, obviously that this bill passed the House, it is not enacted yet. It still has to pass the Senate, and then it has to be signed by the president before it goes into action. So those things with the 12 weeks of FMLA and also the testing and the unemployment, and then also the sick leave, those have not passed. They've only passed the House. There's still steps they need to move forward and get into impacting our businesses. So that's a really important point to make.
Good. Thank you for clarifying. I think that's one thing we really want to make sure our members are aware of. We are here to help provide resources to you and give you information. But it's really important for you as a business owner to really stay in touch and up to date, and looking at what the facts are right now before you make decisions for your business. And if you have any questions, anytime, give us a call at the Chamber, and we're happy to help talk you through that, or point you in the direction of some more resources as you make your decisions.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of moving right into that piece that you talked a little bit about, the Small Business Administration economic injury disaster loans. Where we're at right now with those is we've had several businesses reach out to us about when are we going to get designated as a disaster area to be eligible to receive those funds. The governor's office is currently working with the Small Business Administration's administrator to make sure that they get all the information they need, and then we get that declaration, and those loans are available for people. And why that is you have to demonstrate the economic impact to be declared as a disaster area. And why that is then obviously those loans become available based on who's been hit the hardest. So what we're doing right now and what's being recommended is that you reach out to the county emergency management and get them the information, things that you're going to want to provide them this information on impact. That would be things such as cancellations of special events, downturns in customers, the loss of revenue, shipments being held up in foreign countries, et cetera, that have a negative impact on your bottom line, and then obviously show that net economic impact. So not only will you want to share it with those county emergency management officials, but also the Iowa Economic Development Authority is going to have a survey going out to gauge the impact, and what that survey will be mostly is for businesses to fill out so they can demonstrate that negative impact to make those SBA disaster loans available. And what those loans are is they're up to $2 million in assistance for small businesses to overcome the temporary loss of revenue. It's 3.75% for businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits for up to 30 years.
Great. And so we'll obviously do our part to help spread, share the information from the IEDA or any of our partners to help get that out to our members to take part in those surveys. Anything else federal before we move on to state?
I don't believe so. I think we hit on just about everything we needed to, but I mean, we continue to have conversations with both the SBA, the state administrator here in Iowa, and then also all of our elected officials out in DC, their staff. We are bouncing emails off repeatedly with them to make sure that we're on top of this and the businesses are receiving the resources and information they need.
Great, thank you. So moving on to back to the state of Iowa. So Iowa legislature has suspended session. Tell us a little bit about that and the impact and what else, what are we doing?
Oh yeah, sure. So the legislature suspended their session for 30 days, and that's really obviously just as a containment and also that social distancing piece that they're going to be doing. The governor has been doing all her work from the Emergency Operations Center in Johnston as a preventative measure and a cautionary measure as well. But last night, the Iowa legislature did pass a bill that does kind of put forward some emergency funding and some emergency pieces in place. And what that was is it grants Governor Reynolds an increased ability to transfer spending between state agencies and departments, and also gives her flexibility to allocate funds where it's needed and even tap into at the most 10% of the state's $200 million economic emergency fund to deal with the coronavirus. So it really just gives her latitude within clear parameters, obviously, to be able to take corrective action that she deems necessary without the legislature having to approve it. So that's really important. But also with the governor coming out and recommending that 4 weeks of school be taken off, even though we're in the midst of a spring break, it does. One thing that this legislature had to do as well is waive the school's requirements to make up classes for canceled days, because that's obviously a really big deal when you're looking at that required 180 days per state code. So they did waive that, so it won't negatively impact students in their ability to graduate or move forward with their education. And they also did pass an appropriation for some programs, including $525,000 for processing COVID-19 test kits at the state lab at the University of Iowa. So that was another big thing for stateside. We're seeing a lot of the time it's very similar to what you see at the federal, just trickling down to the state. But the state is really taking a very active approach, and we credit Governor Reynolds and her administration for the steps, and the legislature for the steps that they've taken in that regard.
Great. Yeah, I think it's important to share, just like we're all doing business a little bit differently, so are all of our elected officials. So we still have everybody's, things are still happening, progressing, and all our officials are still working to make the best decisions for all of us. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, that life is going on, and let's continue to keep working for the greater good of all of us. Now, anything else about the unemployment insurance claims from the governor?
Yes, actually, I did want to make sure I mentioned yesterday there was a press release also that came out before her press conference that Iowa Workforce Development announced that they had assistance for workers and employers impacted by potential layoffs related to COVID-19. The guidance includes information for employees about filing unemployment insurance claims, as well as information about programs available for employers. One of the big things within that is that if, God forbid, any companies do have to resort to layoffs, temporary layoffs, it would take away some of the responsibility of unemployment insurance on those employers, and the state would kind of foot that bill, which is obviously a really big thing for businesses as they too cope with this emergency that we're seeing throughout the country. So that was a really nice step from the governor's administration and Iowa Workforce Development to provide that certainty to those businesses in these trying times. If, God forbid, like I said, they do have to resort to that kind of thing.
Now, this is a side note, but yesterday we announced, a lot of our restaurants and bars are going to be closing down or shutting down, limiting hours, that kind of thing. And so we actually have one of our members who is a healthcare provider in our community, and they are needing some additional workers to help fill some shifts right now in housekeeping and that sort of thing. And so we're actually trying to pair up. So if any of our members have employees who are going to have less hours and would like to get more hours somewhere else, we can help kind of match you to another company that you could work temporarily, just to help continue getting an income and getting some hours during this time. So that was shared with our membership yesterday in an email. So check that out for more information, or just give us a call as well. Now, Drew, so anything else with state level?
Not that I know of. I mean, we can anticipate continuing to see the president and the governor doing most likely daily press conferences. So we'll continue to keep keep an eye on what they're saying in each of those and make sure that we're sharing that with our members. Because as I mentioned earlier, things are changing by the minute with resources and announcements and legislation and all these different things.
Absolutely. So coming back then to the local level, to Story County in particular, we have an announcement about we're already thinking ahead to the primaries.
Yeah, very much so. So it might be hard to think of right now, but June 2nd is actually the primary for the 2020 general election. So Story County Auditor Lucy Martin took some proactive steps and really recommended absentee voting. She sent a press release out and linked the absentee ballot request form yesterday afternoon. And she's really pushing people to put in a request to do absentee voting and vote by mail to once again continue that social distancing and not get people in crowds bigger than 10 people. So kudos to her and the county for thinking ahead in that regard as well.
Wonderful. So just to share with everybody, we're continuing to be in contact with all of our elected officials and working really well with our partners here in Ames and Story County. So as more updates become available for our local government, particularly as it relates to this, to COVID-19, we will be putting that back out to our members and sharing in more virtual settings like this. So we look forward to sharing more information with you. Drew, any last thoughts today?
Just make sure you're putting that data together and watch for that survey that we're going to be sending out for the Iowa Economic Development Authority to really show those impacts that this has had on your business, because that's going to be really important as we look at getting certified for that economic injury disaster loans and just in general to monitor and gauge what exactly the impacts are.
Great. So thank you. So we'll share all those links that you mentioned. We'll share that as well on our website and social media. Again, we're at ameschamber.com. Give us a call at 515-232-2310 for any questions or concerns you might have at this time. And we thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.